in the footsteps of heroes on a Ledger Battlefields tour.
Welcome to Ledger's Battlefield podcast. We begin at Tyne Cot, on the eastern edge of the battlefield, just short of the village of Passchendaele, a name forever synonymous with the First World War. Tyne Cot got its name in 1915, when it was seen almost certainly by men of the Northumberland Fusiliers or the Durham Light Infantry, and the buildings here on the ridge reminded them of cottages back home in Tyneside. The area of Flanders is relatively flat, and any rise in ground will afford you an advantage on that battlefield. And here on the ridge, this was one of the key objectives in the 1917 operations, which is why, in many respects, this cemetery is here. The British Army reached this point in October of 1917, when the ridge was captured by Australian troops. Canadians then took over, and they made the final push for the village of Passchendaele itself. And a cemetery was established, and 11,500 graves were moved into this site in the 1920s, representing men from every regiment of the British Army, all of the fighting, the 4 years of the war around Ypres, and many, many famous battles and engagements in Flanders fields. Having seen the graves of the fallen, what remains on the landscape today of the First World War? 5 miles from Tyne Cot is Sanctuary Wood, the last of the original post-war trench museums where you can explore the old front line. Sanctuary Wood got its name in the early phase of the war, when this was a place of safety, sanctuary away from the battlefields. But in 1915 it was on the front line, and it remained pretty much on the front line for the rest of the war. What you've got here amongst the trees is a section of British trench dating from 1915, 1916, and it saw intensive action here in June 1916 when the Canadians were attacked by German troops, pushing them off the last remaining bit of high ground they held just outside Ypres. Life in the trenches was as much a battle against the elements as it was against the enemy. When men occupied positions like these, they were working on their trenches, they were repairing them, stopping them from collapsing on top of them, working on dugouts, working on funk holes in the side of the trenches to shelter in, and pumping out water. Aside from all that, of course, was the enemy's weapons, the shell fire, gas attacks, rifle grenades, trench mortar weapons, all coming in your direction, making life pretty much unpalatable on a daily basis. Aside from preserving the actual trenches and some of the positions within the wood, the original owner also preserved some of the shattered trees. 1 or 2 stumps remain amongst the regrown wood, and they show the scars of war, bullet holes, shrapnel marks. 4 years of continuous bombardment, very little was left. Nothing of Ypres, nothing of the villages, and nothing of the landscape smashed to bits by shell fire during the 4 years of World War I. Trench warfare was costly for both sides. Just a few miles north of Sanctuary Wood is Langemark, a huge German cemetery with more than 44,000 burials, of which 20,000 are men in a mass grave not much bigger than a cricket pitch. There's a very different atmosphere here to the British cemeteries. It almost reeks of defeat. And when you look at the long lists, it's almost an A to Z of German surnames. There's a sense of injustice. These men marched into battle wearing little brass belt buckles that read "Gott mit uns," God is with us. And they believe that just as much as our men did. One of the immediate things one notices in the German cemeteries is the lack of individual commemoration. Up until the 1950s, each grave was marked by a cross. This was replaced by tablets laid flat in the ground, listing more than one name. The 4 German figures to the rear of the cemetery symbolise German soldiers mourning for their fallen comrades. The military funerals on the battlefield, soldiers sang "I Had a Comrade," a favourite song of the day, to remember their friends who died in battle. And those figures are there to symbolise mourning over Germany's lost sons fallen on the field of battle. We end our journey at the Menin Gate in Ypres. There was a saying during the war, with the last man through, please shut the Menin Gate. There was no physical gate here, it was just a gap in the ramparts, the walls that surrounded the city. In the years following the war, to commemorate that vast legion of missing soldiers, the British government erected the Menin Gate Memorial that commemorates 55,000 British and Commonwealth soldiers who have no known grave. And it is here, 8 o'clock every evening, the men of the Ypres Fire Brigade play the last post in memory of not just those missing soldiers, but of all 250,000 British and Commonwealth soldiers who fell at Ypres during the 4 years of the First World War.
Walk in the footsteps of heroes on a Ledger Battlefields tour.